Hello, I am Michael Golden, and welcome to Mayor's Ham Shack. My call sign is KM8YOR. I am a general license amateur radio operator, and I'm here today because I enjoy teaching and talking about some of these things, and I think it's very important that as a technician, someone who you have no experience and you're going into the technician license exam, to just know the questions and understand them, because if you don't have the life experience of actually doing radio, a lot of these things don't make sense even if you read them from a book. Doesn't mean you shouldn't study, but you should definitely also look at the questions and honestly just memorize them. Make sure you know them and understand them, because if you memorize them and you really understand the concept when you memorize them, it'll just be much easier both when you're operating and when you're taking the test. Today we're talking about the T2 part operating procedures, section C. In section C we have public service emergency operations, applicability of FCC rules, RACES and ARES, net and traffic procedures, operating restrictions during emergencies, use of phonetics and message handling. There are 11 questions in this section, and we're going to go through all of them, and then we'll come back and I'll just read each question, give you all the answers, and then tell you the answer without much more explanation than that. There are some things we'll explain in here. Some of these are just honestly memorize, know, understand them. But there's not too much explanation to them because they're just pure amateur radio stuff. Okay, let's get into the first question. When do FCC rules not apply to the operation of an amateur station? A, when operating a RACES station. B, when operating under special FEMA rules. C, when operating under special ARES rules. Or D, FCC rules always apply. So you'll see 3 different organizations. 2 of them are amateur radio organizations, RACES and ARES. And then you have FEMA in there, and this is a very powerful government entity. Love, hate them, they exist. Amateur radio operators even have to coexist with FEMA. So RACES is an emergency amateur radio group that's specifically called out in Part 97 of the FCC rules. ARES is Amateur Radio Emergency Services, a little more general than RACES. Any sort of emergency, community involvement, anything that can help the community, ARES often involves with that. It doesn't always have to be an emergency. The key thing here, though, is they have to still follow all the rules, even FEMA. So the answer is FCC rules always apply. There's a key thing here, though. This rule, or this question, has another question that's kind of contradicts it. We're going to talk about why when we get there. Question 2. Which of the following are typical duties of a net control station? A, choose the regular net meeting time and frequency. B, ensure that all stations checking into the net are properly licensed for operating on the net frequency. C, call the net to order and direct communications between stations checking in. Or D, all of these choices are correct. So let's talk about a net. A net is usually on a particular frequency, sometimes a repeater. Has one person who controls everything that goes on. Everybody else checks into the net control, stating that they want to participate. And then the net control facilitates, talks to everybody, make sure, nobody's interfering or talking over each other. trying to give everybody an opportunity to talk as needed. So, yeah, they probably could choose the regular net meeting time and frequency. That part's not really important in this particular discussion. Sometimes a group of people can agree to a time in a meeting and say, hey, blah, 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 you can be the net control operator. And then that person would be the net control operator. So let's look at B. Ensure that all stations checking into the net are properly licensed for operating on the net frequency. That's a lot of work. Have to look up every single call sign. Make sure everybody's legal. So that leaves C. Call the net to order and direct communications between stations checking in. And there's your correct answer right there. Let's go to 3. What technique is used to ensure that voice messages containing unusual words are received correctly? A. Send the words by voice and Morse code. B. Speak very loudly into the microphone. C. Spell the words using a standard phonetic alphabet. Or D. All of these choices are correct. So in a voice message, we're talking about unusual words. Most of the time, this typically ends up being more like, this usually comes down to being more like acronyms. And usually our call signs is the number one thing we give in this sense. So let's look at our options here. A, send the words by voice and Morse code. That's difficult because you don't want to do Morse code on the same frequency you're doing voice necessarily. And that doesn't mean the person on the other end even understands Morse code. B, speak very loudly into the microphone. If you go back to the previous video I did on T2 Part B, we talked about having a hot mic, it being too hot, loud voice becoming distorted. So we know it's not B. So it all comes down to, again, C. Spell the words using a standard phonetic alphabet. So, for instance, my call sign is K-M-A-Y-O-R. You know, M's and N's, especially on HF, can be difficult to hear. So I'll say Kilo Mike 8 Yankee Oscar Romeo. That way it's clear. Everybody knows the NATO phonetic calls alphabet. That's very important to know. So make sure, especially right after you pass the test, you're going to want to use it. Don't, unless you forget, and I forget too, try not to use other words other than what the NATO phonetic alphabet is, because most of the people you talk to are going to know that one. 4. What is RACES? A. An emergency organization combining amateur radio and citizen band operators and frequencies. B. An international radio experimentation society. C. A radio contest held in a short period, sometimes called a sprint. Or D. An FCC Part 97 amateur radio service for civil defense communications during national emergencies. So this is just one of those ones you just kind of have to memorize. The correct answer is D. It's an FCC Part 97 amateur radio service for civil defense communications during national emergencies. Would not be a bad idea to skim Part 97, since most of those questions on this test are in there. They're directly in there. So if you read Part 97, it's a boring read. It's not going to be a fun read. And you may still not understand everything, because if you're taking this test, you probably have not done radio before. So at least peruse it, be familiar with it. Question 5. What does the term traffic refer to in net operation? A. Messages exchanged by net stations. B. The number of stations checking in or out of the net. C. Operation by mobile and portable stations. D. Requests to activate the net by served agencies. So again, traffic referring to something specific. We talked a little bit about net operation earlier. You have a net control operator, and they have multiple people checking in. Now, traffic, there's something called the National Traffic, Amateur Radio Traffic, National Traffic Organization. So pretty much you can get on one of these traffic nets and you can send a formal message to people, amateur radio operators and even non-amateur radio operators through it. So traffic is trying to send a message to somebody. So very simply, the correct answer is A, messages exchanged by net stations. So there's a whole national traffic net out there where you can check in, you can send a message, and then the message gets relayed. And it gets relayed however far it can get each time. So let's say I have a message. I know one traffic net I can very easily get on Wednesdays. It's on my repeater. So I get on, I say, hey, I have a message. Somebody on that net will take my message, and then they'll usually get on HF. They'll get on to their traffic net, and there's multiple traffic nets going on HF. There's at least 2 a day, probably in your area that you can access or that you'd be able to hear from your position. And it gets relayed there, and then they relay it to another place, and so on and so forth, until it gets to its desired destination. Number 6. What is the Amateur Radio Emergency Services, ARES? A. A group of licensed amateurs who have voluntarily registered their qualifications and equipment for communications duty in public service. B. A group of licensed amateurs who are members of the military and who voluntarily agreed to provide message handling services in the case of an emergency. C. A training program that provides licensed courses for those interested in obtaining an amateur radio license to use during emergencies. Or D. A training program that certifies amateur operators for membership in the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service. So ARES stands for Amateur Radio Emergency Services, as stated in the question. So there's a lot of possibilities here that are actually kind of valid. Going down to D, a training program that certifies amateur operators for membership in the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Services. So that is not true. However, in ARES, you do have some training you can do. So a training program that provides licensing courses for those interested in obtaining an amateur license to use during emergencies. That one is not true because you already have to have an amateur radio license to be a part of ARES. So we have A and B left. And the correct answer is A, a group of licensed amateurs who have voluntarily registered their qualifications and equipment for communications duty in the public service. 7. Which of the following is standard practice when you participate in a net? A. When first responding to the net control station, transmit your call sign, name, and address as in the FCC database. B. Record the time of each of your transmissions. C. Unless you are reporting an emergency, transmit only when directed by the net control station. Or D. All of these choices are correct. So when you want to participate in a net, you need to contact the net control operator. However, when you're looking at this, you see A. It says, when first responding to the net control station, transmit your call sign, name, and address as in the FCC database. There's one key thing that's not right about this one, and that is you do not need to transmit the address in your FCC database. If they need to look it up, they can look it up. Whatever's in the FCC database goes, okay? So you can have a P.O. box or your actual address in there. If you have a P.O. box, that's what they're going to see. So no, you do not need to just go and broadcast your address to anybody. It is easily looked up in the FCC database. So B, record the time of each of your transmissions. When we talk about keeping logs and stuff like that, we don't need to keep a log of each transmission, just the duration that we're involved. So if you're on the net for an hour and you've mostly listened, you just specify that in your log. I listened from 8 a.m. to 8:20 a.m. If you want to put in your notes how many times you transmitted, that's fine. But it's more about how long were you on that net, how long were you listening on that net. So we know it's not D. All these choices are correct because we've already eliminated 2. So that leaves C. Unless you are reporting an emergency, transmit only when directed by the net control station. One key thing here is if you haven't checked in yet and the net control asks for check-ins, go ahead and give your call sign at that time. If they ask for questions responding, give your call sign, wait for them to call you and say, KM8YOR, go ahead with your question or comment. Number 8. Which of the following is a characteristic of good traffic handling? A. Passing messages exactly as received. B. Making decisions as to whether messages are worthy of relay or delivery. C. Ensuring that any newsworthy message are relayed to the news media. Or D. All of these choices are correct. So good traffic handling. We talked earlier about what is traffic. It's in essence passing a message. So the key thing here that we are looking for is, what about the message? Well, is it your decision to decide whether it's worthy of relay? No, it's not. And then ensuring that any newsworthy messages are relayed to the news media? No, you shouldn't be doing that. If you're trying to transmit a message to a celebrity or that, doesn't need to go to the media. If the media hears it, that's fine and dandy or whatever. But it's really not about invading people's privacy. It's about making sure a message gets to where it needs to go. So the correct answer is A, passing messages exactly as received. Number 9. Are amateur station control operators ever permitted to operate outside the frequency privileges of their license class? A, no. B, yes, but only when part of a FEMA emergency plan. C, yes, but only when part of RACI's emergency plan. D, yes, but only in situations involving the immediate safety of human life or protection of property. So if we go back to the first question, you'll note I said there's a contradiction. We have reached the contradiction, okay? In that part, it says an amateur station must always follow FCC rules. So this question is a little different. I'll tell you right now, the answer is not A, no. That's why I don't like the first question, because it is a bit misleading. There is one time you are allowed to ignore all of your operating options. Even if you don't have a license, you are allowed to transmit in this situation. It is not FEMA, and it's not RACI's. RACI's, you have to be an amateur radio operator. And like I talked about earlier, FEMA has to follow the same amateur radio license or rules. That's why they oftentimes have to work with amateur radio operators. They do have some frequencies of their own as well, but sometimes amateur radio operators are a little more prepared than they are. So the correct answer is D. Let's talk about this. Yes, but only in situations involving the immediate safety of human life or protection of property. This is a very clear FCC rule. No matter what, if human life or severe property is in danger, you're allowed to operate in any way necessary to get assistance. Now, It doesn't mean you get to jump on the firefighters or the police frequencies and say, hey, I think I'm sick, I'm gonna die, or I need help, blah, 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 blah. If you do that, you better be very legit. Like someone is about to shoot you, or you're about to die, or something like that. If you can dial 911, you are required to do that. This is when it says, but only in situations involving the immediate safety of human life and protection of property. It means it is your last resort. It is the only option. There are no cell phones. There's nothing else that you could legally do to get your message across, to get assistance. That's when you can pop on that police band and say, hey, I need help. I'm here. Please send help immediately. If they continue to talk to you on that frequency, then go ahead and continue to talk to them. If they ask you questions or anything like that, answer them. Keep it short and sweet. Do not mess around, because they will get upset if it's not an emergency. The FCC will hound you down. We found that out in Colorado. I believe it was. There were forest fires there, and a guy wanted his property protected. So he was going on the firefighters' frequency and transmitting and saying, hey, take this over here. Go put the fire out over here. It's coming at me. When in reality, that was in no way what he should have done. In fact, he was asked multiple times to get off the frequency. So it wasn't one time or two times, it was multiple times that he was on this frequency and was asked to stop. So go ahead and transmit once, make it quick, make it, I need help, I'm here, this is the situation, and get off that frequency unless they ask you questions and ask you to continue to talk. Number 10. What information is contained in the preamble of a formal traffic message? A. The email address of the originating station. B. The address of the intended recipient. C. The telephone number of the addressee. Or D. Information needed to track the message. So again, if you've never done a formal traffic or even saw a message, then you wouldn't know this. So the correct answer is just straight to it. D. Information needed to track the message. Number 11. What is meant by check in a radiogram header? A. The number of words or word equivalents in the text portion of the message. B. The call sign of the originating station. C. A list of stations that have relayed the message. Or D. A box on the message form that indicates that the message was received and or relayed. Again, you've never done a radiogram, never heard a check, so this is just a clear memorization. Is A. The number of words or word equivalents in the text portion of the message. Alright, now that I've gone through and given you a basic explanation of all the questions, I'm now just going to go through them, read the question, read the answers, and then tell you what the correct answer is. So let's get started. Question 1. When do FCC rules not apply to the operation of an amateur station? A. When operating a RACI station. B. When operating under special FEMA rules. C. When operating under special ARES rules. Or D. FCC rules always apply. And your correct answer here is D. FCC rules always apply. 2. Which of the following are typical duties of a net control station? A. Choose the regular net meeting time and frequency. B. Ensure that all stations checking into the net are properly licensed for operation on the net frequency. C. Call the net to order and direct communications between stations checking in. Or D. All of these choices are correct. And the correct answer is C. Call the net to order and direct communications between stations checking in. 3. What technique is used to ensure that voice messages containing unusual words are received correctly? A. Send the words by voice and Morse code. B. Speak very loudly into the microphone. C. Spell the words using a standard phonetic alphabet. Or D. All of these choices are correct. The correct answer is C. Spell the words using a standard phonetic alphabet. Number 4. What is RACES? A. An emergency organization combining amateur radio and citizens band operators and frequencies. B. An international radio experimentation society. C. A radio contest held in a short period, sometimes called a sprint. Or D. FCC Part 97 amateur radio service for civil defense communications during national emergencies. And the correct answer is D. An FCC Part 97 amateur radio service for civil defense communications during national emergencies. Number 5. What does the term traffic refer to in net operation? A. Messages exchanged by net stations. B. The number of stations checking in and out of a net. C. Operation by mobile or portable stations. Or D. Requests to activate the net by a served agency. And the correct answer is A. Messages exchanged by net stations. 6. What is the Amateur Radio Emergency Services, ARES? A. A group of licensed amateurs who have voluntarily registered their qualifications and equipment for communications duty in the public service. B. A group of licensed amateurs who are members of the military and who voluntarily agreed to provide message handling services in the case of an emergency. C. A training program that provides licensing courses for those interested in obtaining an amateur license to use during emergencies. Or D. A training program that certifies amateur operators for membership in the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service. And the correct answer is A. A group of licensed amateurs who have voluntarily registered their qualifications and equipment for communications duty in the public service. Number 7. Which of the following is standard practice when you participate in a net? A. When first responding to the net control station, transmit your call sign, name, and address as in the FCC database. B. Record the time of each of your transmissions. C. Unless you are reporting an emergency, transmit only when directed by the net control station. Or D. All of these choices are correct. And the correct answer is C. Unless you are reporting an emergency, transmit only when directed by the net control station. 8. Which of the following is a characteristic of good traffic handling? A. Passing messages exactly as received. B. Making decisions as to whether messages are worthy of relay or delivery. C. Ensuring that any newsworthy messages are relayed to the news media. Or D. All of these choices are correct. And the correct answer is A. Passing messages exactly as received. Number 9. Are amateur station control operators ever permitted to operate outside the frequency privileges of their license class? A. No. B. Yes, but only when part of a FEMA emergency plan. C. Yes, but only when part of RACE's emergency plan. D. Yes, but only in situations involving the immediate safety of human life or protection of property. And the correct answer is D. Yes, but only in situations involving the immediate safety of human life or protection of property. Number 10. What information is contained in the preamble of a formal traffic message? A. The email address of the originating station. B. The address of the intended recipient. C. The telephone number of the addressee. Or D. Information needed to track the message. The correct answer is D. Information needed to track the message. 11. Last one. What is meant by check in a radiogram header? A. The number of words or word equivalents in the text portion of the message. B. The call sign of the originating station. C. A list of stations that have relayed the message. Or D. A box on the message form that indicates that the message was received and or relayed. The correct answer is A. The number of words or word equivalents in the text portion of the message. Thank you so much for joining me. I really hope you're finding this helpful. Again, my name is Michael Golden. My call sign is KM8YOR, and this is Mayor's Ham Shack. Please subscribe and give me a thumbs up. I would greatly appreciate it. And leave any comments, suggestions, or if you just want to say hi, please leave it in the comments. I would be glad to reply. Take care.